Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I hope you hear me well. First of all, well, congratulations for the program you have put together. Thank you very much for thinking on us. Thank you, ILEA, and especially Johannes Hedinger for your continuous dedication and attention to what we have been doing and actually sharing the same interest. It's a pity I'm not there because I think that the way in which the conference has been unfolding and the basis in which it's being built connects very much with what we are focusing at for the last 10 years, in particular of work within Inland, the parent institution I will tell you about, and previously when I started around 20 years ago, the urgent question of the environmental crisis was still something to talk about, something to inform about. I remember trying to join in different environmentalist campaigns and activist groups, and feeling the urgency to explain about, for example, the dangers and risks of climate change or the decline of biodiversity. Now we are not longer in the point of having to inform or tell or knowing better. We are even reaching the point of saturation of information. I think it's more of a moment of trying to find ways forward to transition from the understanding of the complex moment we are in to define where there could be other ways, other forms and visions to define our models of development. In that sense, when we talk about nature-culture relationships, for us in Inland, we focus very much in the aspects of the rural as an interface, the landscapes we live in, and especially in Europe, where there is not properly any wilderness left. This idea of wilderness absent of human intervention, maybe in the very high peaks, but that's even not anymore, like exempt of that human intervention. But we live in landscapes that are agroecosystems, modeled by the hand of peasant communities for millennia, and that include as well, especially mountain landscapes, as in Switzerland. I grew up in between a remote rural location in the mountains north of Spain and the city of Madrid, and I think that feeling of let's say, this encounter and gap between worlds was something that informed very much my interest. I felt it as an urgency. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our proposition. If you allow me to share screen for a moment. Yes. 1 second. And I will tell you first about the topic is something we started to work time ago. The idea of looking at the ideologies of nature. Ideologies of nature are related also with Lefebvre notion, and it comes also with the notion of different forms of reading the way we are in nature. And sonic anthropology is something we are starting as a way to understand, for example, the passage from life to death in Spain, and I guess in your context and other contexts. For example, the rhythms of life and death in the rural are marked by the sound of the bells in the village that can tell you if the person was old or was young, if it was a man or was a woman, and gather the community for the convention of showing sympathies. But also, even 1 year later, there is a new service usually in the village, in the area we are in, that actually is even more important than the real moment of dying of the person. So that passage of 1 year, one cycle of all the seasons, I imagine it as a moment where the community around the person who has passed away is actually welcoming the person back to life more than just saying goodbye, no, to the person when passes away. And then the importance as well of the wake, you know, the idea of being with the person that passed away. So actually, we started to think that in the rural context, or in what we have learned from the peasant cultures, there is not only the promise and the possibility of a good life in the sense of summa causae, the Andean indigenous concept of living a good life in sense of contempt and in a certain sense of harmony, in a certain sense of self-limitation, of let's say deepening in the experiences of the everyday that allow you, know, the combination of labor and contemplation. It's very different from the endless, no, tasks and the form of never-ending, no, ongoing productivity that mechanization of and this servitude of the first industrial and then the digital revolution has taken us. That shouldn't be coming without necessarily the idealization of the rural. Sorry. When we are talking about the decline of the rural, it's very much related with the aspects of wait a second. The aspects of how the land is organized, the land use, and the forms in which the life and death at this moment are also related with, for example, places of extraction, places of convening, no, the necessary gathering of resources for the existing current model of production to continue. And in that sense, I think that now, for example, the emptied landscapes of human habitation, they are also can be studied from a sonic approach. The bells in the villages may be substituted by also the humming of different vehicles, the idea of tourism of a sport, and also the humming of the windmills, the idea of the landscape being a space of reproduction of and extraction of energy as well. But in this sense, what we see is that there is a ongoing friction of the different uses of the land and visions of the land, and that's something that it's showing also the current gap we are living between the projection from the city and the reality of the land. The pandemics, for example, opened a space of listening, a space of for example, we were with the flock, with the flock of sheep we have, and we were able to distinguish many more bird songs. But at the same time, it made many to crave for that idea of projected, let's say, nature, of projected peace in the land. No? And then many frictions, for example, happening now with people that are like going to the land expecting this idea of retreat, of rest, a rest that is not leisure, that it's also like the quietness of the lack of vitality of the countryside and the land. So in that sense, we could say that the imposition, for example, when Henry Lefebvre speaks of ideology of nature and how sometimes in the search of those picturesque of the small villages, what remains of life of them is forgotten. The noise of roosters, bells, or tractors awake the visitor, and then these sensitive aspects of the public life connect with Lefebvre analysis, rhythm analysis, that has for us a potential for studying the rural landscape, the images and soundscapes, and can reveal about the current mode of organization of rural social environments. The static representation, the lack of contact, speak to us of the search of silence of the anti-city, and with the disappearance of voices and sounds of a human presence embedded in that agroecosystem, the silence of death appears again. That connects very much with recent work we were doing as well. That is involved, I show you again, involved as well at looking at sound processes, combining cultural production and agricultural production. And in that sense, here, for example, we were just sharing in that first study of the sonic anthropology, the village that was demolished to give space to a dam, a village in the north of Spain, where the houses were demolished, and then that silenced valley covered by water, not without the protest of the neighbors, now creates a new space of just, well, sort of artificial landscape or replascape of water and mountains and so on. So the idea is to kind of look back to the forms of nurturing new forms of life and living structures. And this is what Inland is trying through the production of knowledge and spaces of training, production, and a farm crafts art produce commercialization to the access to the land. Just to mention that we'll talk later about the Inland Academy, but I'm very happy that Dharmendra Prasad, who is an artist, part of your exchange, and doing like formidable contributions in your context, is also at the same time part of the Inland Academy. And yes, we are fascinated of this possibility of exchange with Dharmendra and his ongoing project for Bihar in India. Now, if we look a little bit of the reality, is that the countryside in Spain is very much dissociated demographically from the big centers where most of the population is concentrated. And at the same time, the land is going to be affected heavily by climate change and water stress, grow increasingly. But till now, also many of these sort of rural areas that have been seen and considered and flourished by the European Union are at the same time concentrating what we call high nature value farmland. So what you can see in this map is that the darker green areas actually concentrate a very high biodiversity in comparison with the successful, let's say, industrial farming areas of Central Europe or the monocultures of forests in Scandinavia. For example, in the border between Spain and Portugal, or mountain areas, we see a much higher biodiversity. It's actually the places where the rural questions are starting. So the rural communities are still more strong. So Inland started working in 22 places around the country, and then moved into creating projects that are focusing on the rural context where we are in, projects that are immaterial more than material, that focus on co-creation more than authorship, that focus on sometimes the frictions and difficulties and not just the celebration or just bringing culture from the city or from another context to the countryside, but actually to think on what would be the role of the artist in that context. No? And apart from that, we produce cheese and books, and we also facilitate pastoralist movement. I'm going to tell you about a practical example of a specific project we're recently doing. We are recovering a village in the north of Spain. We hardly show about it. We keep it in a secret location, also aware of the risk of arts becoming a factor of gentrification in rural areas. As you know, the artists sometimes move to places that were affordable, and then they create like an economic dynamic of progressively displacing the local communities and the possibilities they have to access the land or in a neighborhood to access a house. But the village we are recovering was not entirely abandoned. It had a beehive, a vibrating beehive still alive, abandoned, but still going on. As you know, the bees are like semi-domestic, semi-wild. And in this case, they had gone through several winters and years on their own. And every year before we started the works in the village, we cleared the path to the beehive. After that, we realized it would be important to have an apiary in the village, looking at the vernacular architecture of houses that host the beehives, that you can work from the inside and access the beehives, and then at the same time, yes, trying to rethink that from the point of view of healing techniques from Eastern Europe and Russia, and forms of apiaries that allow you to coexist with the species and actually be breathing the different vapors coming from the beehive. So we designed a form of an apiary built together with students from art, design, and architecture, and that a place that could host the person to be just also in exchange with the animals. And this is now the year we put in place the beehive. And this has been not only, as I said, a way to reintroduce beekeeping and honey production in the village, but also a way to reflect for us on this activity and produce different artworks. Amongst them, a sound piece. And I don't know if I will be able to share with you a sound piece. Would you please let me know if you can hear this excerpt of a sound piece we did around the apiary and the tradition of telling the bees, or the tradition of yes, keeping the bees updated of what happened in the community, in the village, by whispering to them. So we started a humming choir, mixing our perceptions of changes in the landscape, our mourning of the changes of climate change, and at the same time the length wave of the humming beehive, as well as labor songs of the area, focusing on also of beekeeping. So I'm going to play a bit, and please let me know if it sounds, because I'm not sure if it would work. it here. The piece is 15 minutes, and I can share it with you if you're interested. This is one of the sound pieces we are sharing as well in the space here in Kassel, in the Museum of Natural Sciences, part of our contribution to this documenta, and just to continue telling you a bit more about the project. Um, the ongoing experimentation with the PRE continues as well with the form of the sound piece and also graphic works. In this case, we were printing these sort of micro poems we wrote thinking as a bee, and then combined with depictions of the wall paints in different Romanesque chapels around the area, plus other diagrams about bee flights. So, for example, the first small poem says, "When in winter, golden honey sunrise altogether close breathe warmth." Or there's another that says, "Search and pursue, my dear peers. There the noblest nectar the wings can carry, die or kill once, but hive eternally." And in this way, I think that uh, collaborating with local beekeepers has also been crucial to test different forms of do-it-yourself technologies to protect the apiary from the attack of hornets. So now we are testing different forms of electric arcs that are necessary to keep the bees safe due to the Vespa velutina, as you know, extension of what is considered an invasive species that can, well, last year we lost 5 beehives because of it. I will tell you just a bit more about a little bit of the way in which we operate in some way within the role of culture as being a connection point between the material resources or the ecosystem and society. How culture can create a set of symbolic operations to transform the way in which we make use and impact on material resources. And that at the same time, the material resources, the forms of use of energy and material and matter in the ecosystem, it's the form of metabolism that it's creating or not, creating a healthier and healthy environment, you know, for us and other species. Now, the way in which we work is mostly through 3 communities of practice or spaces. The village in the north, in the mountains, a space of temporary use in Mallorca, in the island Mediterranean ecosystem, and then the space in Madrid city, where we are running as well a center for the approach of the rural, and also their different. Oops, sorry. Also, there are different um, um, initiatives like the urban flock. Now, the way in which the collective projects itself is what is considered the art world, or internationally, but also, let's say, in that sphere of representation, as well as promoting a pastoralist movement. These are the main axes of work for inland at the moment, thinking on infrastructure, habitat and production, the idea of training and knowledge, and the idea of economy and network. The form in which we work with economy is now experimenting with, for example, the cheese coin, and the main networks we are developing at the moment are the Confederacy of Villages, that it's a European network of projects based in the rural, for example, Grais del Arts in England, Casa dell'Agricoltura in Italy, KF-Huset in northern Sweden, or a project in Armenia. Actually, these days we are having a presentation of the Confederacy of Villages in Italy, and the other network we work globally. It's Lumbung network. Lumbung is the concept, as you know, of a rural barn in Indonesia, where the harvest is shared by the different members of the community, and in case of need, is redistributed. So the concept for this documenta has been based in that form of cooperation or rural learning. And what I find more revolutionary is, for example, that we not only represented form of arts that are social and I don't know, that connect with the urgencies, but also at infrastructural level of the documenta, we have been rethinking, for example, the economy of the whole notion of this event, creating a common pot and distributing amongst the partners. There has been also the promotion of the exchange of our products of the different projects in the Lumbung kiosk. It's a form of a market or shop, if you like, of the different things we do, as well as Lumbung Gallery. So I think that in other, you don't know, in Venice Biennale, no, you would have the private galleries supporting the different art projects. In this new, for me, very regenerative form, there is the Lumbung Gallery in which we can put or not our artworks. A percentage of the sales go to sustain the Lumbung network. And today, after I have to leave you in the conference, we will have a Lumbung land group discussion. So we are starting within the Lumbung network of partners to discuss about how we develop our land-based projects. Particularly, we are now in exchange inland in Spain and Jatiwangi Art Factory in Indonesia, recovering primeval forest, and Wayuku Arts that was working in the slums of Nairobi, but now acquiring land to develop a form of a learning space in the outskirts of Nairobi. And that also connects very much, for example, with Dramendra's proposal. And as inland, we believe that this importance of the network should keep going. No? So this is some images of the Shepherd School and a specific training project started in 2004, connecting the young people who would like to become new shepherds, and they don't know how, with existing pastoralists and shepherds. And then there is a sort of a transference between the old and the new, and in that sense, a regeneration as well, a reinvigoration. No? Every year we offer this training, and around 150 people apply, and then we have to select around 50. And well, I guess in Switzerland you already have as well this form of training. For us, the thing is that as it's not official education, it allows us to constantly change, for example, the curriculum. So this year we included how to not only, for example, work with the sheep and the goats and make cheese, but also how to work with communities, so in the sense of visitors, families, and how the shepherd of the future would be as well a sort of an educator in that sense, a communicator of a world that needs to find its place, no, in the future with more agency. That idea of returning agency is what guides the Global Alliance of Mobile Peoples. We're working around the grasslands, and since 2007, when we organized a global gathering of pastoralists from different parts of the world, we have been promoting the World Alliance of Mobile Indigenous Peoples with representation in the UN system and having like a say in different UN fora. So this is more like this projection I was telling you in the global political sphere. We managed that the United Nations declare 2026 the International Year of Renaissance and Pastoralism. So it would be great to create solidarity between the livestock herders and mountain farmers in Switzerland and other European areas. And then we are also have a presence in the climate crisis, climate discussions towards climate justice, in the sense that pastoralists are working with low carbon emission and highly efficient forms of production in rural areas that wouldn't allow agriculture, and nevertheless are often depicted in the media as the bad, being the bad guys in the movie. No? That the cow pollutes as a car, and that in general animal products are bad for the planet. But we want to stress always that it depends of where, when, how, no, those animals are raised, and the importance of distinguishing what indigenous and mobile pastoralists are doing and what industrial intensive factory farms are producing in terms of livestock systems. So let me tell you a little bit more about the origins of the Inland Academy. It starts with the idea of the new curriculum, taking the village we are rebuilding and connection with different universities. I think we were working with Basel University in Switzerland and different other centers, and they were coming to exchange for different knowledges, from landscape architecture to sociology, art. Here, for example, we see the different participants talking to Nell. Nell is inland member and pastoralist himself, part of the project, and then at the same time learning by doing and doing, looking at the different cases that we could start to rethink from that, let's say, composition of knowledges, the mountain, the village, the fields, the forest, and how the different participants, for example, will look at the problem of a mountain that has a national park imposing a certain rule, and then the traditional forms of management and the commons. There has been also moments to organize all that knowledge in different forms of performance that connect also with existing culture that is still alive in the villages, with the form of the seasons passing through the mask, characters that appear and that allow us to connect with the environment and with the other in a way that is like beyond that every day. I think in the mountains cultures in Switzerland is also very strong, and it's something that shows us the spiritual and cultural richness of the communities that are like at the same time fading away, but still somehow alive. That form of art, part of the everyday, that is not just the object that we see in an exhibition, but is more coming to be part of it. We also started collaborations in 2015 with Hito Steyerl, for example, producing an art piece that was being shown in Documenta, as you might know, unfortunately, due to her personal decision and with the difficulties that have came with the political discussions around interpretation of this Documenta, is not shown anymore in our space, but it related very much with the fact of thinking the cheese we produce here in the cave as the Fort Knox of inland cheese production as a source for a new currency, the cheese coin, and the cheese coin is now being currently also distributed in the cheese pavilion there here in Kassel. I'll tell you a little bit more about our other spaces. This is where we work in Mallorca, where we are focusing in a village. 10 years ago, we started to see how we could nurture the village beyond the extraction that the tourism industry and mass tourism does of certain places. Like how we deal with what would be the need of having a more authentic and real connection and mutual support rather than just the service industry. And then we started to work on a landscape that could be as well expanded, a landscape that is not just something you see and photograph, but can be lived through life arts and performance. This is a reference in the image to Anna Halprin. As you know, Anna Halprin was working with forms of landscape understanding through performance. And then in these different occasions that we are in the village, we work with, for example, the styling aspects of the landscape or guided walks with the last hunter. Considering that they have another way of reading, understand the landscape, reading the different, for example, skills of a dry stone wall maker and the importance of keeping this form of managing the landscape alive. Working in Mallorca for us is also important because it's a sort of a representation of a biosphere, small biosphere that is very much critically affected by climate change. Have in mind that this summer, for example, there was not enough water in the island and it has to be transported by tankers from mainland and then distributed with trucks for the villages that are hosting so many visitors, taking their showers and so on. So it's like a form of a critical a situation of idealizing a landscape that is like actually ecologically not functional, not functioning. So in Madrid city, we bring our flock of sheep from the mountains and seasonally graze the biggest park of Madrid city. We walk through the roads and periphery of the city to access it. And finally, we're also defining how we could have an infrastructure to host ours and the shepherd, learning from mobile forms of architecture like the kepenek, or let's say a cloth, and then defining as well a possible house for the sheep with the students from architecture, learning from other forms of mobile architecture and the different uses in the park. So with this, having this in mind, we came up with a design with Sergio, who is an inland member, that is based on the form of arc that you can reproduce. And then these ephemeral architectures we also tried before in Hauser and Wirth in Somerset. This is a goats pavilion, a pavilion just for the goats. But in Madrid, in the park, we were building this structure that can actually be reproduced anywhere. We share the plans with anyone who wants to have this modular form of place that is like allowing us also to close the cycle from the milk to the product. And this is very important for inland, not to talk about the land or the rural, but actually live in it and produce within it. So I think this is also very important. And then the urban flock becomes as well a space of learning and connecting with the others, and hosting different activities for kids where they also learn to relate with the animals beyond the Disneyification of the animal as a pet, no? But actually to understand that sometimes life and death are entangled in the pastoralist production. And for example, we have a simulator of how to run your own flock of sheep and so on. And this is the mobile dairy of Finland that at the same time is a mobile radio. So here we are producing a piece and recording next to the flock, while we are later we will use it as well for the transport of the animals and for the cheese. So with this other example of the sonic anthropology related with our activities that we are engaging with, I think I would leave it here, and maybe we have a short moment for questions or comments or anything. And I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm sorry for not being there with you and for taking so long in this early Sunday morning. I hope it was interesting. Thank you.
The floor is open to questions. I take the freedom to ask the first one, if you agree, while you're thinking. I have actually two questions. One is related, I think, perhaps a little commentary. I think that there is, in this project that you are forging, there is this kind of deep notion of care, or, carence, or even responsibility or responsibility, as in the kind of new theories quite often elaborated on. That all these projects carry. And I really would love to hear perhaps more from you on the notion of care and how your projects basically, whether this was something that, emerged as a side product of all your approaches, or perhaps something that you from the very beginning kind of embodied. I am also very interested in the chat, because you obviously had very limited time, and you pointed just in a very kind of not limited but very, very a small way to the ways how this building up of those networks and infrastructures, how they actually pose also challenges, and sometimes you encounter perhaps difficulties and burdens that need to be succumbed or to be overcome. And I wonder about this. I have also a very detailed question about the materiality of this amazing beehive sound project, because it also points back to a project which we had here, I think 2 biennials ago, which was created by Marianne Halter and Mario Marquisella, with the beehive basically being present here at one of the power plant locations, and and it created a very wonderful kind of sound. The amplification of it also kind of, emphasized the importance of listening in or learning from, right, the animals, the insects, the earth. I also want to mention, Johannes just pointed me to this, that your Escuela des Pastores beautifully connects with another project we had here 2 years ago, We had Davis Hanshin. He basically lived with the sheep, up on the Alps and learned from them. It was a very processual and wonderfully kind of embodied project that we hosted here in the Artsakhental. Yes, many words, but over to you.
Thank you for reflections. Yes, and actually you pointed to a very crucial question when you mentioned about care, because care is at the core of the form in which in the farming activity and in pastoralism you relate to the land and to the other non-human animal, and it has been like so much embedded in it that sometimes it becomes not visible or not articulated. The way the person relates with the cows, the way the farmer relates with the land or with the plant, the only way in which we manage to progress in the adaptation and mutual adaptation within those other species and creating nurturing environments and landscapes, it was like for a progressive, continuous and persistent form of care. So it's like this kind of even, how to say, a visceral form of one you would find, no, in the mother and the son, and forms of deep care that are like unquestionable and that have been substituted sometimes by efficiency in the production and other forms. No? So it's maybe through the elaboration of proposals and articulation with other languages like the arts that we can put care back at the center of the operations that are crucial, no, in relation to the land and how we sustain ourselves. And then other layers as well. For example, for next Istanbul Biennale that is opening in mid-September, we are working in a village in the north of Turkey, in the border with Armenia, and with the community there, we are developing forms of care of the community itself that are also taking from different sources. So just to give you an example, there have been a series of workshops on on emotional communication within the village, no? And how, for example, it's not just that, I don't know, in Spain sometimes and often in rural areas there is a certain segregation of gender, and then the men would go to the bar, they would hardly talk, or they would just talk in a way, that isn't just, I don't know, a sort of a facade, of virility and very heavily constructed masculine identities. But now, by working with emotional communication, for example, we are allowing the village to also open a space. And it is very interesting because you're in this Turkish village in the mountains, and then at some point you went to visit a neighbor, and he's like, no, now he's taking some time to talk to another neighbor who came to see how they feel, and they are talking about their feelings and so on. So this is important because we need to create those structures of mutual care in absence of a system that offers care, in the sense that materially, for example, when I was working in the Andean mountains in Ecuador, I was surprised that the villages were much more advanced than us in Europe, because there was an absence of the state that organizes and distributes, in a paternalistic way, what stays, what is removed. We give you little subsidies so you can stay in the village, but we actually take your children out because we don't need the school here. So no, there is a whole operation and a policy. But in these other places, there was absence, and then the people were organized with village parliaments, local bank, participatory budgets annually. They had a university of indigenous knowledge. So it's like, I came as a European thinking that I could contribute in other ways, like, wow, we have so much to do in terms of our rural areas, and how they have been deprived of the possibility of agency. And parallel to that, what I wanted to say is that if our society, if our model of society is increasingly concentrating and atomizing the individual experience in the loneliness of the agent that is like concentrated sometimes in our electronic devices and no longer even interacting in real, then we need to create those other forms of care, of mutual support for the turbulences that are to come. And just to end, I remember I went to give a talk about the GMO crops in the early 2000s to a village in Aragon, near Huesca. And at the end of the talk, somebody approached me, an old man, and told me, very interesting. And in our old days, before the Civil War, when we collectivized the land and created a community here, well, we were talking about these other forms of agriculture and so on. I said, well, how did you manage well, it was the CNT and FAI libertarian people in the countryside who organized self-managed villages. And he said, well, this was not about ideologies or talking and so on. We were just silent neighbors that were helping the other and creating forms of if your son was ill, we will go to call the doctor and things like that. And when there was a fascist uprisal in Spain, the people, they were just trusting each other and built a system to sustain themselves. So I think this is also going to be crucial in times of transition, to more, let's say, less demanding, or in terms of scarcity in some way. And just to end, yes, the networks are challenging, are difficult. The nomadic people's networks, for example, is very demanding in terms of difficulty to connect, in terms of language. And our experience is that it's very needed to build them based on needs, not on ideals, what it would work for, why it's useful, and also to put attention on the rotation of the link in the chain that would be dynamizing the network. And I was happy to hear about the other projects, like you've been developing in the Biennale, like around the beehives, and the learning from those who have that experience on the land. I think the sound of the beehive is especially important because, as you know, it has a sound wave that it's like a form of vibration that actually puts us in a space of in a certain position of attention and relaxation. It is said that 3 hours of sleep next to a beehive are equivalent to like 12 hours in a normal bed, because of both the sensory aspects and the vibration. And we, in our sound piece, we found out that certain sort of drone sound from the bagpipe, that is the traditional Celtic instrument in our area, it's also connected with a certain frequency in the beehive. So we're combining the drone of the bagpipe and the beehive as well. But yeah, thanks a lot for delving into that. Remember to unmute yourself. Johannes?
So this is Johannes.
Yes, hi, nice to see you finally in person. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the amazing talk, and congrats to all the wonderful projects and initiatives you do with Inland and so on. I have a lot of questions, so but I try to keep them short. Just a short one to the humming choir, great piece. So I'm interested to hear more how you present that as a sound file, or as a CD, or are there performances, or are there an installation? And within that, just a mention of our bee piece, what Hannah mentioned. We had it as a permanent installation. So we had a beehive with a microphone in it, and it went to 4 speakers. And it's a huge buzzer there, and it's like an autodrome, and it sounded then also like it's car driving around, but obviously it were the bees. And it was a wonderful concert, but some holiday house owners then complained, and then we had to agree that the bees only fly between 8 to 12 and 1 to 6. So that means the amplification was out the other day, so they had even a break. Of course, the bees are flying all the time, but so this is not everybody found it very relaxation on that part. Then I would love to have also an urban sheep program for our little son. So maybe we can come over at some point. One short question is about the Hito piece. I just arrived at that day when they closed it in Documenta. What was a pity. Do you know, is there soon any chance to see that piece somehow? legally or not legally. And my first, fourth and long question would be if you could then introduce us all a bit more to the UCAN program. We only have a 10 days program, but you run it also a whole semester long. So I think, or I'm pretty sure that some of our audience would be very interested to hear if yes, how they could attend at some point. Yes, a lot of questions.
No, thanks, Johannes. Very good. The song for the apiary, as it is titled, it's sometimes difficult to separate from the apiary itself, from the beekeeping, from the architecture, from the graphic and poems I showed you about. And I think it's being shown in different ways in different occasions. But in the last itinerance, first it was in Madre, Naples, now it's here in Kassel, and it will be in Museo della Montagna in the north of Italy, in Torino. In the last itinerancy of the piece, we wanted to play also with light and a smell, and then in the room we covered the windows with panels of paper, bee-waxed paper. So then the light is somehow filtered through the bee-wax paper, and with the action of the sun, the bee-wax starts to melt as well, and it expels a certain smell and aroma. And also we wanted to recreate the feeling of how it would be for the larva to be inside the beehive. So the idea of a reticular form of filtered light that actually has to do with the monastery, if you like, or the convent, where in the old days they didn't have glass, so they used alabastrum and marble and filtered the light into a sort of an amber embryonic liquid, if you like. So the idea is to create a chamber of resonance that resembles the beehive, and this form of amniotic suspension, and and then we played with 4 loudspeakers and 4 channels. We never play this outdoors or in an open space. And I don't know if that would work, because I think I'm a little bit reluctant, I have to say, to intervene in the space, in the rural space, or in the beyond the construction of the gallery space of the exhibition, with elements that could be very, you have to say, present or expanding. No? So I don't agree necessarily when visitors, for example, to rural areas are against the sounds of the rural activity, but maybe within the context of the arts, we also could consider that they are layers of sound that we add, that are just also sometimes we give no choice, and then which is the agency we give ourselves, as artists, for example, to, I don't know, put a bigger sculpture in the forest or things like that. I think I started inland to react to the idea of art and nature, in which many artists were just, considering this notion of nature as somewhere where you put things. But maybe we have to find ways to traverse the experience of the artwork, to make the visitor or the audience or the participant to access them in a non-imposing way and things. But yeah.
So far, it was always the recorded file used in this different iteration, but there were never a live concert with live flying bees and amplification.
That's a good question. No, because our piece involves several layers, amplifying, recording, and so on. Yes, but I have to say that here in Kassel, we did collaborate with local beekeepers, and we have a beehive in the garden, and it's interesting because for us it was important as a reference to the beehive center of the village I told you before. This, let's say, vibrating, pulsating entity, and then we conceived it as a flag for the pavilion, and it's in a tower, and it's high also because of the practicality of avoiding the bees to hit the people. So it's like 4 meters high in a structure of wood. This was also under the request of the Natural Science Museum staff that they wanted to have more pollinators and insects in the city. And it's funny because we had to react to certain questioning from visitors, especially from the Animal Liberation Front and things like that, saying that it was it's less like cruel to have bees under the sun somewhere high. And we had to explain that first, the beehives are naturally adapted to very high temperatures. We have them in Mexico and Colombia in the deserts. They create environments that ventilate and refrigerate themselves. And second, to be high, it's a very anthropocentric way to consider a dwelling, no? Like bees fly and they are in trees, so it's not cruel to have them in a tower 4 meters high. Anyway, just to give you an example of the sometimes gap on understanding from the beekeeper and the person in the city that has not a real experience of the land, but actually has a strong influence in how the public opinion, or even people might end up buying honey from a small producer, no? Just because it's involved with, I don't know, a certain notion of anthropocentric reading of how we deal with the animal. Sorry, about the other two questions.
Maybe especially the CAN program, and then there's another question.
Okay, yes, because I don't want to. Yeah, just about Hito's we don't know yet when it would be shared again and in which way. It's a moment of difficult understandings in political positions. And then about the question of the program, the Inland Academy happened this year for 9 months, connecting with Documenta, connecting with Serpentine and other different spaces we're working with and trying to connect with the village. Dramendra couldn't attend all the sessions. We don't know yet how next year of Inland Academy will be. If it happens from January onwards, 2023, we might avoid the itineracy through different locations. Like that was very demanding in terms of traveling, and actually focus more in a more intensive period where we have also the dairy and the shepherd school and combine the different speakers and the different theoretical aspects with that. I would say keep an eye on Inland Academy. I think it's inland.org/academy, and we will see how we connect also with year one students. We are talking about a form of mentorship between year one and year two participants and taking case studies from that. So
that's really amazing, and that we try to be in contact with you anyway. And I think there's a question from the audience, so I hand it over to Jeremy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Johannes.
Thank you very much for your presentation and for the very important work you're doing. I have a question. At the beginning of your talk, you showed these maps also with the agricultural systems with a high value in terms of biodiversity. And what I think about, I mean, you also have this tendency of industrialization in Spain. How do you try on a political way to protect these ideas of care in agricultural systems?
Yes, totally. I think it's the two sides of the same coin. No? On one hand, you dismantle the possibilities of having a strong, interconnected rural communities, for example, by not allowing a lot of economical opportunities or education opportunities, of services, a market that don't distinguish between, for example, a lamb has grown free and walking and healthy in the environment, and a lamb that has been produced industrially in huge productions, maybe in New Zealand, and shipped to Europe. So there is no recognition that the organic label helps on some labels, but at the end also it's a form also of policing production. No? Like we say, more than labels, we need trust, no? Between the consumer and the producer, and create those systems of trust and proximity. So on one hand you dismantle, and on the other hand, when there is nothing, you create the illusion of terra nullius, no? Of no man's land. That happens also, for example, in the colonial project. The big, I don't know, flock of animals in the south of Argentina, in areas of the United States, were possible only because the other layer of use of the land, no, and or wild herbivores were just deleted, erased. Now, what we see in Spain is, for example, many areas that have been radically or critically depopulated are now spaces of interest for future projects or future visions or dystopias of, for example, intensive animal farms, factory farms. So this we are questioning and campaigning against within the farming movement. I think it's very important that it's not just the environmentalist movement, no, or citizens that are questioning that intensive farms produce, like I don't know, manure that the land cannot process. They produce methane, that produce animal unwellness. But that should be also done with the voice of the other farmers that say, hey, this, if we continue in this path, not only you are giving like worst products to the consumers, but you also are yes, like putting in danger, no, as well the sustainability of the systems. I remember one campaign by the French farmers that they were saying, we want more neighbors, not more hectares. No? So they were starting to question that each of them had to run maybe 900 hectares with huge tractors, and then they went back to the village and they had nobody to have a glass of wine with. So that sound, no, I mean, there is no, let's say, there is no effort now in farming through machinery, but there is no celebration after the effort. So there is no longer an event, for example, the end of the harvest and so on. So yes, I think that what we are trying is to show the importance of extensive pastoralism. For example, we will do soon, well, actually in 3 days I have to go back to Spain, and we have Arte, Canal Arte, it's a German-French channel, and they will be making a program about the shepherd school and trust humans, the importance of the animals moving. Because when the animals move by walking, they, for example, transport many seeds, and the seeds of plants travel in a way that allow them to adapt to other environments faster than in natural conditions, so with just the wind and so on, in a context of climate change. So the vertical mobility from the valley to the mountains, for example, seeds transported by the organic dejections as well as the wool, allow also adaptation of plant species and many other environmental benefits. Or in Spain, for example, cleaning the forest from bushes will prevent fires and many other questions. So yes, is what we are trying constantly to show through the art projects, no? That there is a value in these high nature practices, and that we just need to make them economically feasible, agroecologically sustainable, but also culturally vibrant. I think that's the crucial role we need to have as artists in this context.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
Fernando, thank you so much. I think probably there will be more questions, unfortunately, from the audience. We are very tight on time, having quite a full agenda, so we will have to wrap up. If you allow, we'll just forward the questions if they occur,
Sure.
to your email via Johannes. And
please.
I very much hope this is the beginning of our long-term collaboration. We really look forward to, observing your project and staying in conversation further. And just
Thank you
please
so
join
much.
me in thanking for this wonderful
Thank you. Thank you to all. Have a great rest of the conference and stay in touch. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.